So I want to give you just a minute here as we sort of get started. I really would love for this to be just a time for us to each sort of reflect on our own leadership, who we are and what we do. And so I'd actually, and maybe someone can help me, Caitlin, or, that I'd love for you all, if you can grab something to write with, or maybe open up a, I don't know, open up a Word document or something. And Caitlin, I'd love to give folks like maybe 5 minutes of just quiet time. So maybe this is a time when you can turn off your camera for just a minute. But what I'd like for you, I apologize, this is a little like morbid to think about your funeral. I understand. I was also gonna say like, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? So if you feel more comfortable with that, or you don't wanna like, think about your funeral. Although I do think it's like a really important question to think about. What do you want people to say about you when you're not here anymore? So when you're not in the room or when you're at your funeral, I'd love to just give you about 5 minutes to think about as you just imagine how people remember you or what stands out about you to others. So could we do like maybe like a 4 or 5 just minute reflection time? Does everybody now have something to write with or a place to capture some thoughts? Okay, cool. Well, then let's give you about 5 minutes. You can turn off your cameras if you want, and then we'll bring you back in 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, you all. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those. Really powerful, and I think a really good, I encourage you to hold on to that somewhere, especially as you go through the rest of this series, as you think about your path and how you're becoming who you are, answering that question, who am I? What am I about? And what am I leaving behind? Like, what's my legacy going to be? That's a piece, in my opinion, of this idea of integrity. When we think about like integrity and transparency as the cardinal principles, they're sort of written around our, who we are as a university. But clearly, like today, what I want you to think about is integrity and transparency as very personal sort of leadership measures of who you are. And I want to talk a little bit about how we get there. So let me ask you all first. I love that we're, I've gotten really accustomed to people using the chat box for things, but I love that you all are talking. So maybe we can keep this up here. I love it. As we sort of move into this idea of thinking about integrity, I was wondering what you think of it. When you hear the word integrity, what does it mean to you? What is integrity to you all?
When I hear integrity, I always think of the book, The Once and Future King. And it's because we read it in high school. And I remember in the front cover, our teacher was explaining integrity. And it said that if you lie and someone finds out about it, then you've lost some integrity. Mm-hmm. And then it's also like one of the core themes of the book and King Arthur as he travels through his life and whatnot. So that's what I always associate integrity with.
Really good. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Yeah. How about somebody else? Like when you hear the word integrity?
I can go. When I hear the word integrity, it's obviously about being truthful, but also being truthful to yourself. About like anything.
Yep. Thank you, Smith. How about someone else? Yeah, Braden.
I kind of think of it as like following through on what you've promised, either, yourself or other people. I think of it less of like just telling the truth all the time, not telling lies. Like, I think that you can like lie. I mean, especially white lies, and still have a lot of integrity. It just depends on if you're doing it for the important things.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. How about one more? So when you hear the word integrity, anybody hearing it in a different way or speaks to a different thing for you?
When I hear the word integrity, I think someone who stays true to their values and is not afraid to show that no matter what happens.
Yeah, thank you for that, Courtney. I really appreciate that. I think we're all sort of really speaking to it in really wonderful ways. And I want to just add my own definition here that, I think a lot of you have said this too, that when I think about integrity, I think about aligning my beliefs, aligning who I am with my actions, what I do, so that there's no difference between who I am and what I do. My beliefs and my actions are aligned. And so I think some of you are speaking to that when you're, like being truthful and honest, following through. So the alignment of beliefs and actions is what I think about when I think of integrity. And of course, like embedded in that definition, this idea of who you are and how important it is for us to understand who we are. Like there's a process of sort of developing our identities that usually happens for us in college, to be honest with you. There's a sense of like, when we're younger, we are often who other people thought we were, who our parents thought we were, or who our teachers told us we were. And one of the things that I know from working with LGBTQ students for many years is that coming to college for many people is that first opportunity that we have to step outside of the sort of the identity that others have given us, the who we are that others told us, and to really start to examine for ourselves who we really are, to let that identity really begin to reveal itself for us. And so, this is like an important time that leaders start to form, and those leadership values start to become real for us. We get to decide how we show up. We get to decide what our actions are. And so what a great time to be talking about this and thinking about, who am I, and how do we figure out who we are? And then how do we live a life that reflects in an authentic way, so that there's no discrepancy between what we believe, what we think, how we feel, and how we act. So the opposite, I just also wanted to add to this, like the opposite of integrity for me is the idea of hypocrisy. And hypocrisy, actually, the word hypocrisy sort of grows out of this Greek idea of an actor or a person who wears a mask. Hypocrisy is like pretending to be someone we aren't, or having behavior and actions that actually don't align with our true, authentic selves. So that sense of pretending and not being real and authentic is the idea of hypocrisy for me. So when you think about those two things together, it really starts to formulate the journey for us as leaders, is the journey of really starting to think about who we really are and how are we going to be who we really are. So I hope you all are okay with this. I wanted to tell you just a little bit of my leadership story, because it really is all about authenticity. It's all about like figuring out who I was, and also, like, to be honest with you, like unpacking my own hypocrisy and learning to like step into the truth for me. So, and I really appreciated earlier some of the things you all shared, because one of the things that many of us share here, it sounds like in the group, is a faith tradition and a faith journey. So I grew up, I was born in the 60s. I grew up in the 60s. But my parents, we have a strong faith tradition, Christian faith. And so I grew up in church, in Sunday school, and that was the path for me of like understanding what my values were and what was important to me. And I really authentically embraced just the importance of a faith foundation, of having like strong principles and beliefs that I lived by. And so much so that I so when I chose my college, I grew up Southern Baptist. And so I went to a Southern Baptist college, and I started preparing for a life in the ministry. So my goal in life when I was a teenager and as I was going to college, my goal in life was to become a pastor of a church. And so I graduated from college. I actually was coming to Louisville. The reason why I even made it here to Louisville was that I came here to go to seminary. And so I'm telling you that because it's an important part of me becoming who I am, that I got here to Louisville. I started enrolling in my classes, and I started having this identity crisis, you all. I realized that who I believed I was and my actions and the way I was sort of what I was telling the world that I was, that there was some sense growing inside of me that it wasn't the truth. Not the faith part, not the part about believing in something higher and something bigger than myself. But I knew that there was a part of me that was not authentic, that there was hypocrisy kind of in my own life. And so I had come to Louisville. I was getting ready to go to seminary, and I just realized I can't go, I can't do it. I can't, my path is sort of getting sent in another direction. And so I came to U of L and actually went to the department where Caitlin studies, in educational counseling, psychology. Caitlin went the student affairs route. I went the counseling psychology route. And I thought, well, I just need time. I need time to figure it out. Something's wrong. I'm not, there's something about myself that I haven't quite figured out yet. And so, I started going to counseling. I started getting really depressed. And probably the only time in my life that I was, somewhat suicidal, because I was having sort of a crisis of being able to be who I am. And through counseling and through sort of that process of just really, really examining, myself and who I was, I began to realize that I was gay, and that the crisis was that I was not able to really fully be truthful and authentic about that part of my identity. And what I realized was that I wasn't going to make it if I didn't do that. If I couldn't become who I really was, if I couldn't learn to be my whole self and to be honest and to be open about my whole self, that I think I wasn't going to survive. It was a crisis at that level. And so, for me, it was the hardest thing. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, going back to my church, going back to my family. All of my friends were people in some kind of ministry. And I was scared, I was scared because I had gotten messages over the years from school and church and popular culture and from everywhere that this was not okay, that you can't be gay and have a faith tradition. You can't be gay and be successful. You can't be gay and live a happy life and be a leader and all the things that I thought. And so I had to start that very, very difficult, journey of starting over again and figuring out how to be who I really was and how to incorporate my truth, my authentic self. And I'm so grateful. I just want to tell you all this too, because I am so grateful to U of L. Thank God I came to U of L, because I started to find support. It's funny because I'm getting emotional, and I've told this story 65,000 times. As the director of the LGBT Center, it was sort of my job, but I feel even when I talk about it now, I just realize that what I want so much for each of you is for you to, you know, what I want for you is it won't be as hard for you as it was for me, but that you won't be afraid to do something that's hard, that you won't be afraid to do the hard work of uncovering and unpacking your own like truth, even if it's not what people want you to be or what your family told you to be or what you learned in school or church about yourself, that the real work of like, who am I really? And when I am gone and people talk about me at my funeral, that the person they talk about it like reflects who I really am. So I started that journey at U of L and you know, I think the world has changed in many, many ways. And U of L, you know, we talked about this at the beginning. U of L is one of the most welcoming schools in the United States. By some measures, the most welcoming school in the United States. But that was not true back in 1988 when I was coming out. It was not the most welcoming place. And I didn't know who I could talk to. I didn't know who I could tell. I was afraid. And so I had to, you know, begin taking that risk of just like that people might reject me, people might not love me anymore. Because so many of my friends had strong sort of spiritual values about being gay, I lost a lot of friends. There were people that just told me never to call them again. I had friends who wrote me, this is all before, like, you know, we didn't have smartphones to text these things to each other. So people wrote me letters to tell me that I was gonna, you know, that I was terrible and I was going to hell and don't ever call me again. So that, you know, I had a lot of rejection. And you all might have a lot of rejection as you really like zero in on your truth. There are some people who are not gonna love or accept that about you. The liberation, though, is what I found about myself was the more and more and more I was able to say who I was, to declare who I was, I felt this growing sense inside of me of I'm okay, you know, like I actually started to like love who I was. And then I was able, like, after that, to really actually celebrate who I was, to be authentic. Remember that sense of hypocrisy is like wearing a mask. I felt like I was wearing a mask all the time. I was finally able to take off the mask and let people see who I really was. And that's the beginning of liberation, but it's also the beginning of integrity, because you can't live a life of integrity without knowing who you are and without, you know, celebrating and embracing it. So I just wanted to share that with you. Who knew? Gosh, I think about this story so often because, you know, years later, I had the opportunity to be U of L's first director of LGBT services and open an LGBT center for others. You know, like I was able to say, like, the things that I wish I had had, we can give people now. Like, we can actually create a place where people feel safe and where people feel like they're loved and accepted for who they are, and they can develop into leaders and you know, have great lives. So, you know, that's the payoff there. The benefit is, once you do that difficult work and really get to the core and really uncover your own places of where you might be wearing a mask, you know, where you may not be yet telling your full truth to the world. Once you get there, that's leadership. You start opening the doors for others. You see others see you as someone who is authentic and living in integrity, and it lets them know that they can do the same thing. I hope that makes sense. So then the result is this idea of transparency, which is the other half of the cardinal principle. And transparency is like living your life with nothing to hide, just being able to be completely open and authentic. I'm not saying this is an easy path, but I will tell you it's a worthwhile path. It took me many, many years to get there. But then once you're there, you just see life through a new lens. You you see others through a new lens. You experience yourself through a new lens. So I want to, in that spirit, I just want to talk just a minute about how we cultivate this idea of integrity and transparency. So what are some things that we can start to do to cultivate it? And I just want to leave you with this one like really compelling thought that has been true for me. And it's this: the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And what I mean by that is that integrity doesn't just count on the really big, like life-changing decisions. Integrity shows up for you. The way you build integrity is through the little tiny day-to-day things that you do. So think about every little decision you make during the day. Someone gives you too much change at the grocery store. Do you just pocket it and say it doesn't matter, it's just 15 cents, or do you go back and return it? So thinking about every little decision that we make, the little things are what become the big things. And at the end of the day, when people remember you, they're going to remember all those little things that you did, and you won't think that they were important, but they really do become the story of your life and the legacy that you leave behind. So I want you to think about, in fact, and in just a minute, we're going to do some breakout groups. And I want you to think now for just a minute about a time that you had to do something that was hard, but it was right. So a time when you embraced your integrity. And it could have been a small thing. You might think about a small thing like getting too much change, or I don't know, picking up $5 that someone dropped. Or you might think about a big thing, but when we go into breakout groups in a minute, that's what I want us to talk about. So be thinking about it. I think if I'm remembering my slides correctly, that's where we are. I tell you what I'm going to do before we do the breakouts, though. I want to tell you my own story about integrity. And I don't know how many of you know, everybody had a chance to meet George Howe in this group. Have all of you had like an encounter with George Howe? Not everybody. I see Job saying no. Okay, well, I'm sad. That makes me sad. You know who George Howe is, though, right? The George Howe Red Barn. Okay. Well, before you do your breakout and talk about your own like experience of doing something, embracing your integrity, doing what you said you were going to do, and aligning your actions and your identity. I want to just tell you my personal George Howe story. Julie knows this story well because she was there when it happened, but it's an example for me of, I'm going to get emotional talking about it too, so I'm just going to warn you ahead of time, because I love George Howe, and he is he's the living embodiment of integrity to me. So here's the story. This was several years ago, and some of you may have had the chance to go to Pink, which is the LGBT Center's annual drag show. Everybody know drag? So I think we've all seen an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, right? But like drag has sort of recently become like much more mainstream. But back in the in the early days of the LGBT Center, it really wasn't. And I'm not sure everybody. So we would have drag. So we have this annual drag show called Pink. It's a fundraiser. Lots of people come. Lots of people come who've never seen it before. And so because it was a fundraiser, the students at the LGBT Center decided to start this little competition. And what they did was they went around campus and asked faculty and staff members if they would agree to be in this competition. The person who won the competition actually had to do drag during Pink. So think about that. Like think about your math professor, or your academic advisor, or think about all the faculty and staff you can imagine, and then just imagine them in drag. So that was the idea here, was that they would, so the students would raise money by voting for the person that they wanted to see do drag. And the students went and asked George Howe, who, Julie, how old is George now?
For those of you, George just retired this past September after 50 years at U of L. So George, I believe, now is 77 years old. But at the time, I believe he was in his 60s, late 60s.
I wanted to get, I was going to say he was almost 70.
Yeah.
So our students, y'all, this, I love this so much. I just can't even tell you. Our students, so they all came back one night and they said, we asked a bunch of people to be in the competition. And one student said, yeah, I asked George. And I said, well, what did he say? And they were like, he said, yes. He said he would do anything for our students. And if you know George, if you've heard of George, that's who he is. His integrity is that he loves students, cares about students. And if students asked him to help them with something, he would do anything he could to support them. So it's beautiful. But of course, in my mind, I'm thinking George has no idea what he just agreed to. Like I was like, on his behalf, I'm like, there's no way, like this like 70-year-old cisgender white straight man like just agreed to do drag for the first time in his life. So the first chance I had, I tracked George down. I said, George, do you know what you've just agreed to? And he said, well, I just want to help the students, I just want to support them. And I said, yeah, but you have to do drag, my friend. Like you got to get on stage in heels, buddy, and do drag. And so what he actually, I don't think he did fully understand what he had gotten into, but he said, you know what? I told him I would do it. And if I win the competition, then that's what I'm going to do. And so guess who won the competition? George Howe won the competition. And just because he's a man of integrity and a person who aligns who he is with what he does, he got up on that stage, you all, and did drag. I'm going to just show you so that you can just experience a little bit of George Howe doing drag. Let me just say, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't like RuPaul worthy drag. He wrote the song lyrics on a little 5x7 card so he would remember. But I've never seen anything in my life that made me happier, because I just knew that it came from his heart, and it was just an example of someone like putting integrity first. So I love this story. I love George. And I just wanted you to have this as a little bit of inspiration. Now, let's go back here. And what I'd love for you all to do, and I'm not sure, Caitlin, how much time to give, but we're going to do some breakout groups. And I want you all, as you're thinking about it, I want you to think and share with each other a time when you had to make a decision to do the right thing, when it was hard to do the right thing. And just spend a few minutes with each other, thinking about that, sharing about that, telling a story to one another about a time when your integrity required you to do something that was hard. Does that make sense? Everybody got it? Okay, I'm gonna actually ask for, this is where I phone a friend, Caitlin and others, John, whoever's gonna help us. We're gonna move into some breakout groups, and maybe about, I don't know, do you think like 10 minutes? Well, listen, you all, thank you for doing that. I'm wondering, as we start to close up here, we were just talking in my group about the common themes. So as you heard each other's stories of integrity, of doing things even when they're difficult, I'm wondering if any of you heard a theme that ran throughout. Any other themes?
I'll say one theme was, it usually was the thing that they did was, we'll say, an inconvenience to them in some form, but it was it was to help either somebody else or yes, just not help themselves, obviously.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Braden. What else? Other themes you all heard?
I know that my group, which was killer, by the way, we talked a lot about like how it would have just been easier to not, like, nobody would have
Mhm.
been mad at you if you had just like done the wrong thing, like they would have understood. But
Yep.
at the end of the day, you have that responsibility to yourself and to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Our group talked about just like our responsibility not to create or add to anybody else's garbage.
Yeah.
Like literally, like if there's garbage piled up in like the hallway, I think somebody's talking about that. And then also like not being afraid to ruffle some feathers when you're doing the right thing. Like people are gonna get upset either way, so to just do the right thing anyways.
Yeah. I don't know how many of you are Representative John Lewis, who just passed away, fans. He's one of my heroes of integrity, and he talked about getting in good trouble. So that, like John, that idea of ruffling feathers is like, sometimes your integrity means you got to stir up some good trouble. And Bayard Rustin, who's another hero, we have a themed housing community for LGBT students called the Bayard Rustin Themed Housing Community. He said, in every community, there must be a group of angelic troublemakers. And I always love that idea of being an angelic troublemaker, stirring up good trouble. So that is integrity, even though feathers are ruffled. So thank you for that. Yeah, appreciate that. Well, my group, I'm wondering, was it Lauren? Were you the one who mentioned the theme of courage?
Yeah, similar to what someone else was mentioning earlier, it would just, we were talking about stories and noticed that it was like really hard for us to actually like come forth and just face the problem head on. But it takes like a certain measure of courage to be able to do that. And afterwards we felt better. So.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I really appreciate all of your thoughts and your willingness to talk about hard things. And what I hope for you, and what I just leave you with is just to remember that, that mantra for you, that the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And let integrity, take the easiest, the smallest steps, because then later when you have to do the really big, really gigantic thing, you've built the muscles, you've exercised the muscles of integrity so that you will have an easier time doing it. I am honored to be with you. I have a feeling that you all are going to do incredible things. And also I just want to say, if I can ever support you in any way, or do anything to encourage you, please let me know. I work on campus. I haven't actually seen campus in a while, but in a perfect world, I'm on campus and easy to find. So reach out to me. Just want to say thank you again to Caitlin and John and others who organized this day, and just appreciate you all so much for what you're doing to teach these skills to our campus.